Millionaire rescues abandoned triplets. The truth he uncovers the next day breaks him completely. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Let's begin. The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets across downtown Seattle, transforming the typically bustling streets into a silent, white landscape. Jackson Reed stood at his office window on the 40th floor of Horizon Technologies headquarters, watching the city disappear beneath the strengthening blizzard. At 40, he'd built his company from a dorm room startup into a billion-dollar enterprise, but success had come with its costs: a failed marriage, few genuine relationships, and an emptiness he rarely acknowledged. "Mr. Reed," his assistant's voice came through the intercom, "your quarterly review materials are ready, and Marcus from security is calling. Says it's important." Jackson sighed, checking his watch. 8:17 p.m. Another late night, though it hardly mattered. His modern lakeside home would be as empty at midnight as it was at 6. "Put Marcus through," he replied, turning back to his desk, littered with reports and 3 empty coffee cups. "Sir, we've got a situation in the lobby." Marcus's deep voice crackled through the speaker. At 55, the head of building security had been with Jackson since the early days. 3 children somehow slipped in through the service entrance. They're huddled in the east lobby alcove. Look like street kids. Should I call the police to remove them? Jackson frowned. Children? In this weather? He glanced at the window where the snow was now joined by howling wind. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees, according to the weather alert on his phone. "Show me the security feed." His computer screen flickered to life, displaying the lobby's marble expanse. There, in the recessed seating area near the decorative fireplace, were 3 small figures. Girls, Jackson realized, with identical dark hair but different heights, suggesting different ages. Their clothes were mismatched, layered, and clearly inadequate for the bitter cold. The smallest one was coughing into her sleeve. Something uncomfortable stirred in Jackson's chest. "I'll come down." The elevator ride gave Jackson time to consider his options. Call child services. In this weather, with roads already closing, that could take hours. The police? They'd just take the girls to the station until social workers could be found. Neither solution sat right with him, though he couldn't explain why. The lobby felt cavernous as Jackson's footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Marcus stood a respectful distance from the alcove, his uniform immaculate despite the late hour. "They won't talk to me," Marcus said quietly. "Been watching them on camera. They slipped in behind the cleaning crew about an hour ago. Smart kids." As Jackson approached, the oldest girl, maybe 10 or 11, stood protectively in front of her sisters. Her eyes, a striking shade of green, held a wariness far beyond her years. "I'm Jackson Reed," he said, stopping several feet away. "This is my building." "We're just getting warm," the girl replied, chin raised slightly. "We'll leave." "It's 20 degrees out there with a wind chill of 5, Jackson countered. "Where are you planning to go?" The girls exchanged glances but remained silent. The smallest one, perhaps 7 or 8, shivered visibly despite her efforts to appear brave. Her cheeks were flushed in a way that suggested fever rather than just cold. "Where are your parents?" Jackson tried again. "We're fine on our own," the oldest insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. Jackson noticed their worn backpacks, stuffed full, suggesting they'd been carrying everything they owned. The middle girl clutched a tattered stuffed rabbit missing one ear. "I'm calling social services," Marcus announced, pulling out his phone. The effect was immediate. The oldest girl grabbed her sister's hands, eyes widening in alarm. "We need to go," she whispered urgently to them. "They can't get here until morning anyway," Jackson said, a decision forming before he'd fully considered it. "The roads are already closing because of the storm." The smallest girl doubled over in a coughing fit that shook her tiny frame. The sound was wet, concerning, and it sealed Jackson's impulsive decision. "Listen," he said, softening his tone. "I have a house with empty guest rooms. You can stay the night, get warm, have a proper meal. In the morning, we'll figure something out." The suspicious look the oldest girl gave him was both heartbreaking and sensible. "Why would you help us?" It was a fair question, without an easy answer. Jackson wasn't known for charity or spontaneous acts of kindness. His reputation was built on business acumen and strategic thinking, not compassion. "Because it's freezing. Your sister is sick, and I'm not leaving 3 children on the street in a blizzard, he finally said. Those are my terms. 1 night, food, shelter, and in the morning, we call the proper authorities. The girl seemed to calculate their options, looking from her shivering sisters to the dark, snow-filled night outside. We leave at first light, she countered, before anyone official comes. Jackson knew he should insist on proper channels, but something in her determined gaze stopped him. What's your name? Mia, she answered after a slight hesitation. These are my sisters, Sophie and Lily. I have a driver waiting in the garage, Jackson said, nodding toward the elevator. Your choice, Mia. Another violent cough from Lily seemed to make the decision. Mia nodded once, sharply, and gathered her sister's hands in hers. The ride to the parking garage was silent, tense. In the warm interior of Jackson's luxury sedan, the contrast between his world and theirs became even more stark. The girls huddled together on the leather seat, Lily's head resting on Sophie's shoulder, Mia's eyes constantly moving, assessing, planning. As they pulled away from the gleaming Horizon Technologies tower, snow swirling in their headlights, Jackson caught Mia whispering to her sisters. We'll be gone before he wakes up, she promised quietly, not realizing he could hear. Jackson said nothing, focusing on the road ahead as his driver navigated the increasingly treacherous streets. What had he gotten himself into? 3 homeless children in his meticulously organized home. The board would have a collective heart attack if they knew. His ex-wife would laugh at the irony, the man who couldn't make time for family suddenly playing Good Samaritan. Yet, as he watched Lily's eyes drift closed, her small face finally relaxing in the car's warmth, Jackson felt something unfamiliar, a certainty that, for once, he'd made a decision that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. By the time they reached his lakeside home, its modern silhouette barely visible through the falling snow, Lily was asleep against Mia's shoulder. Sophie stared wide-eyed at the massive house with its wall of windows reflecting the frozen lake beyond. Just for tonight, Mia reminded Jackson as they stepped out into the swirling snow, her voice both grateful and wary. Then we're gone. Jackson nodded, watching as she gently woke Lily. Something told him things wouldn't unfold quite that simply. The front door slid open automatically as Jackson approached, sensing the key fob in his pocket. Soft lighting illuminated a cavernous entryway of polished concrete and glass, minimalist artwork adorning walls that soared to a second-story ceiling. The girls hesitated at the threshold, as if crossing into this world might violate some unspoken rule. It's okay, Jackson said, stepping aside. Come in before you freeze. Sophie was the first to enter, pulling Lily by the hand while Mia followed cautiously behind, her eyes cataloging exits and scanning for threats, a habit that struck Jackson as painfully adult for a child her age. You live here alone? Sophie asked, her voice echoing slightly in the open space. It was the first time she'd spoken directly to him. Yes, Jackson replied, watching their reactions as they took in their surroundings. Just me. It's bigger than the shelter, Lily whispered, still half asleep, her voice raspy from coughing. Jackson led them through the great room, with its wall of windows overlooking Lake Washington, now a dark expanse barely visible through the falling snow. The house was immaculate, designed by a famous architect and featured in architectural magazines. A testament to success, but hardly a home. No photos adorned the walls, no mementos cluttered the surfaces. It was a showpiece, not a sanctuary. The guest room is upstairs, he explained, leading them to a floating staircase. It's never been used, actually. The guest suite contained 2 queen beds with pristine white linens, an ensuite bathroom with a shower large enough for 5 people, and the same floor-to-ceiling windows as downstairs. The girls stood awkwardly in the center of the room, their worn clothes and dirty backpacks incongruous against the designer furnishings. The bathroom has everything you should need, Jackson said, suddenly aware of how ill-equipped he was for this situation. Towels, soap. I don't have any children's clothes, but I can find some t-shirts you can sleep in. Mia nodded, still watchful. Thank you, she said stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with accepting charity. You must be hungry. Jackson realized they likely hadn't eaten all day. I don't have much food in the house, but I can order something. Pizza? At the mention of food, all three girls perked up visibly, though Mia tried to hide it. Pizza would be acceptable, she said, with the gravity of a business negotiator, making Jackson fight back a smile. I'll make the call. Why don't you all get cleaned up? He retreated downstairs, giving them space while pulling out his phone to call both the pizza place and Mrs. Henderson, his part-time housekeeper who lived 10 minutes away. The situation clearly required reinforcements. Mrs. Henderson arrived 20 minutes later, a hurricane of efficient grandmotherly energy despite being called out in a blizzard at 9 at night. At 68, she'd been with Jackson for years, one of the few people who treated him like a person rather than a paycheck or a position. "3 little girls," she exclaimed, already removing her coat. "Goodness, Mr. Reed, you certainly don't do things halfway." "It's just for the night," Jackson clarified. "They were outside the building in the storm." Mrs. Henderson gave him a look that said she'd believe the "just one night" part when she saw it. "Well, they'll need more than a place to sleep. Do they have clean clothes? Have they eaten? Are they hurt?" Before Jackson could answer, the sound of running water came from upstairs, followed by childish exclamations of delight. "The bathtub has jets." Sophie's voice carried down the stairs. "Don't use all the hot water," Mia's more subdued voice replied. Mrs. Henderson smiled knowingly. "I'll put together some things for them. You ordered food?" The pizza arrived as the girls were coming downstairs, hair wet and faces scrubbed clean. They wore oversized t-shirts from tech conferences that hung to their knees, making them look even smaller. Lily's cheeks remained flushed, but her eyes were brighter after the warm bath. In the kitchen, another awkward moment ensued, as Jackson realized he'd never actually hosted children for a meal. Did they need special plates? Different drinks? Mrs. Henderson stepped in smoothly, setting the table and chatting with the girls as if impromptu sleepovers happened every day. "My goodness, look at all this beautiful hair," she said, gently detangling Sophie's dark locks with a comb she'd produced from her magic bag of essentials. "We should braid it so it doesn't tangle while you sleep." Sophie beamed under the attention, while Mia watched carefully, relaxing fractionally when it became clear Mrs. Henderson posed no threat. The middle sister revealed herself to be the chatterbox of the group once the initial shock wore off. "We haven't had pizza in forever," Sophie declared, reaching for her third slice. "Not since—" Mia cut her off with a sharp look. "Not in a while," she amended. Jackson noticed how they ate, quickly as if the food might disappear, with Mia subtly ensuring her sisters got the larger portions. More telling was how they discreetly tucked pieces into their napkins, storing food for later. It was the behavior of children who'd gone hungry before and expected to again. "There's plenty," Jackson said quietly. "You can have more if you're still hungry after that." Lily looked at him with wide, solemn eyes. "Really?" Something in Jackson's chest tightened painfully. "Really? And there will be breakfast in the morning, too." The conversation flowed more easily after that, though Mia remained guarded, answering questions vaguely or deflecting them entirely. When Jackson gently asked about their parents, her face closed completely. "We take care of ourselves," she said, then deliberately knocked over her water glass, creating a diversion that ended the line of questioning. Mrs. Henderson handled the small crisis with good humor, but Jackson didn't miss the calculating intelligence behind Mia's accident. These girls had developed survival strategies that children their age shouldn't need. After dinner, Mrs. Henderson helped the girls settle for the night, producing toothbrushes, children's pain relievers for Lily's cough, and even a storybook from her seemingly bottomless bag of practical magic. "Will you be all right for the night, Mr. Reed?" she asked as she prepared to leave. "I can stay if you'd like." Jackson shook his head. "We'll be fine. Thank you for coming out in this weather." "Those girls have been through something," she said quietly. "You be gentle with them." After she left, Jackson retreated to his home office, suddenly unsure of his role. The house felt different with other people in it, less like a museum exhibit and more like a shelter from the storm raging outside. Through his security system, he could see the girls in their room, huddled together on one bed, despite having 2 available. They were whispering urgently to each other, their faces serious in the dim light. "We leave at dawn," Mia was saying, "before he calls anyone." "But Lily's still sick," Sophie protested, "and it's warm here." "We can't stay," Mia insisted. "You know what happens when adults get involved." Jackson turned off the monitor, feeling like an intruder in his own home. Something about their determination touched him. How long had they been on their own? What had happened to make them so wary? As he finally headed to his own bedroom, exhaustion settling into his bones, something caught his eye in the hallway. A small, worn backpack, presumably Lily's, left outside the guest room door. A corner of what looked like a photograph peeked out from the side pocket. Jackson paused, ethics warring with curiosity. He shouldn't look through their belongings. And yet, if he was harboring runaway children, he should know more about their situation. Hesitating only a moment longer, he reached for the photograph, unaware that this simple action would irreversibly alter the course of his carefully controlled life. The photograph slid easily from the backpack's side pocket, worn at the edges from frequent handling. Jackson turned it over in the dim hallway light, and the world seemed to stop around him. There, smiling up at him from the creased surface, was a face he'd tried for years to forget, Rebecca. Her chestnut hair was longer than when he'd known her, and fine lines had formed at the corners of her eyes. But there was no mistaking those distinctive green eyes and the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident she'd once described to him over late-night coffee. Beside her stood 3 little girls, younger versions of Mia, Sophie, and Lily, all wearing matching summer dresses, in a park he didn't recognize. Jackson's legs felt suddenly weak. He slid down the wall to sit on the hallway floor, the photograph trembling in his hand as memories flooded back. Rebecca Winters, his brilliant, beautiful grad school girlfriend, the woman he'd planned to travel the world with after graduation, the woman who had disappeared without warning 12 years ago, leaving nothing but a cryptic note about needing to find her own path. The woman he'd spent 2 years searching for before finally accepting she didn't want to be found. His mind raced through calculations he couldn't stop himself from making. 12 years since she'd vanished. The oldest girl, Mia, looked to be about 10. The timing would make it entirely possible. Jackson closed his eyes, memories washing over him like tidal waves. Rebecca in the university library, laughing as they studied until dawn. Rebecca in his tiny apartment, painting at the window while he coded his first successful program. Rebecca with snowflakes in her hair the night he told her he loved her. Their plans had been so clear: finish graduate school, launch his startup, then travel the world together before settling down. She'd been supportive of his ambitions, excited about their future. Then one morning, she was simply gone. Her closet half empty, her toothbrush missing, a note on the kitchen table that explained nothing. "I need to find my own way. Please don't look for me. R." But he had looked, hiring investigators, searching social media, contacting mutual friends. She'd vanished completely, as if deliberately erasing her digital footprint. Eventually, he'd poured his heartbreak into building Horizon Technologies, transforming it from a struggling startup into an industry leader through sheer determination and countless sleepless nights. Now, 12 years later, she had suddenly reappeared in the form of 3 little girls who shared her eyes, her hair, her determined chin. Jackson turned the photograph over with unsteady fingers. On the back was a date written in Rebecca's unmistakable artistic script, June 15th, 9 months after she'd left him. The implications hit him with physical force. These weren't just any homeless children he'd rescued from the storm. These were Rebecca's daughters, and given the timing, potentially his daughters as well. But where was Rebecca now? Why were her children alone on the streets? And if he was their father, why had she kept them from him all these years? Down the hall, he heard a small cough from the guest room, Lily, the youngest, with her fever and fragile frame. His mind struggled to integrate this new reality. These vulnerable children might be his flesh and blood. Dawn light was beginning to illuminate the eastern sky when Jackson finally moved from his position on the floor. He carefully returned the photograph to the backpack pocket, his mind made up. He needed answers, but approaching the girls directly with his suspicions might send them running. As he watched the sunrise over the frozen lake, Jackson Reed's perfectly ordered world had been completely upended by a single photograph and the possibility it represented, the family he never knew he had. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as Jackson stared at the pancake batter he'd been stirring for the past 5 minutes. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. The photograph had changed everything. These weren't just 3 homeless children anymore. They were Rebecca's daughters, possibly his daughters. The sound of small footsteps on the stairs pulled him from his thoughts. The girls appeared in the doorway, still wearing the oversized t-shirts, hair tousled from sleep. Lily's cough sounded slightly better, but her cheeks remained flushed. "Good morning," Jackson said, trying to sound casual despite the thundering of his heart. "I'm attempting pancakes. Emphasis on attempting." Sophie's face lit up. "We love pancakes. Mom used to make them shaped like animals." The casual mention of their mother sent a jolt through Jackson. He forced himself to focus on the task at hand. "Animal shapes might be beyond my skill level. I'm still mastering round." Mia approached cautiously, studying the kitchen with those calculating green eyes, Rebecca's eyes. "Do you need help? We can cook." "You can cook pancakes?" Jackson asked, genuinely surprised. "We had to learn lots of things," she replied simply, taking the whisk from his hand with practiced ease. "The batter's too thick. You need more milk." As the girls took over breakfast preparation with surprising competence, Jackson observed them with new awareness. Mia's focused determination, Sophie's artistic arrangement of berries on each plate, Lily's careful measurement of syrup. He could see echoes of Rebecca in each of them, but also traits he didn't recognize. Were any of those traits his? "Did you sleep well?" he asked, serving coffee for himself while they worked. "Your beds are really soft," Sophie offered. "Like clouds. We usually sleep on—" "They were fine," Mia interrupted, shooting her sister a warning look. Jackson decided to start with easy questions. "How old are you all?" "I'm 10, Mia answered after a slight hesitation. "Sophie's 9 and Lily's 8. The timing aligned perfectly with his calculations from the photograph. Jackson felt lightheaded. "And you've been on your own for—" He left the question hanging. Mia flipped a pancake with more force than necessary. "We manage." Jackson changed tactics. "The storm's still pretty bad out there. Schools are closed today." "We need to go anyway," Mia insisted, though less firmly than the night before. Outside, snow continued to fall heavily. "Lily's still sick," Jackson pointed out gently. "Maybe you could stay until the weather clears?" "I promise no authorities if you tell me a bit more about your situation." Before Mia could refuse, Lily's small voice interrupted. "I don't feel good." She swayed slightly where she stood, and Jackson moved instinctively to steady her. Her skin felt hot under his touch. "She's burning up," he said, concern overriding his quest for information. "She needs to see a doctor." "No doctors," Mia said sharply. "They'll call social services." "She has pneumonia," Jackson replied firmly. "I'm not negotiating on this. My personal physician can come here, no hospitals, no reports, but she needs medicine." Lily coughed again, a wet sound that seemed to rattle in her small chest. The sound made up Jackson's mind. "I'll call Dr. Patel right now." As he stepped away to make the call, he heard Sophie whisper to Mia, "Maybe we could stay until Lily's better?" "He seems nice." Mia's response was too quiet to hear, but her worried glance at her youngest sister spoke volumes. When Jackson returned, Lily was sitting at the kitchen island, picking listlessly at a pancake, while her sisters hovered anxiously nearby. "Dr. Patel can be here in an hour," he announced. "She's bringing antibiotics." "Why are you helping us?" Mia asked suddenly, her voice both defensive and genuinely curious. "Most people just call the cops." Jackson met her gaze, seeing so much of Rebecca in those suspicious green eyes. "Because you need help," he said simply, knowing he couldn't reveal the full truth yet. "Our mom died," Sophie blurted out, ignoring Mia's sharp intake of breath. 2 months ago. That's why we're alone." The confirmation hit Jackson like a physical blow. Rebecca was dead. The woman he'd once planned to spend his life with, the woman who had disappeared without explanation, was gone forever. And she'd left behind these 3 girls, girls who might be his daughters. "I'm sorry," he managed, struggling to maintain his composure. "What was her name?" The room fell silent. Jackson held his breath, feigning ignorance while his heart pounded. "Rebecca," Mia said finally, studying his face for any reaction. "Rebecca Winters." Jackson turned away, ostensibly to pour more coffee, using the moment to compose himself. The confirmation of his suspicions sent his mind reeling. "And your father?" he asked when he trusted his voice again. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken complications. "We don't have one," Mia said flatly. "Everyone has a father," Jackson replied carefully. "Not one that matters," Mia countered, a flicker of old pain crossing her young face. Before Jackson could press further, his phone rang, Dr. Patel, calling to say she was on her way despite the treacherous roads. As he answered, he caught Sophie whispering something about the special box to Mia, who quickly shushed her. Jackson stepped into the hallway, his mind racing with this new information. Rebecca had died 2 months ago. The girls had been alone since then, and somewhere among their meager possessions was a special box that might contain more answers. As he ended the call with Dr. Patel, Jackson made 2 more quick calls, one to his assistant to clear his schedule for the day, and another to begin a discreet investigation into Rebecca Winter's death. The tech mogul who had built his empire on careful planning was now operating purely on instinct, driven by a growing certainty that these 3 girls were connected to him by more than just coincidence. In the kitchen mirror's reflection, he caught a glimpse of himself standing behind the 3 dark-haired girls, and for the first time, he allowed himself to truly see the possibility that had been haunting him since finding the photograph. These weren't just Rebecca's daughters. They were his family. Dr. Amara Patel had been Jackson's physician for 15 years, ever since his startup days when he'd worked himself into pneumonia at 25. At 45, she maintained both the sharp intelligence and warm bedside manner that had made Jackson trust her with his health, and now with something far more precious. "Quite the house guests you have, Jackson," she remarked quietly as she set up her medical bag in his living room. The girls waited nervously on the sofa, Lily sandwiched protectively between her sisters. "It's complicated," Jackson replied, his voice low. "I need complete discretion on this." Dr. Patel raised an eyebrow but nodded. She turned to the girls with a warm smile that immediately softened the clinical atmosphere. "I'm Dr. Patel. Which one of you is my patient today?" Lily raised a hesitant hand, coughing into her sleeve. "May I listen to your chest, Lily?" Dr. Patel asked, approaching slowly with her stethoscope. "I promise to be gentle." The examination proceeded with Dr. Patel's characteristic efficiency, tempered by exceptional gentleness. She checked Lily's temperature, 102.3, listened to her lungs, definite congestion, examined her throat, red and irritated, and tested her oxygen levels, slightly low but not dangerous. "Pneumonia," she confirmed, meeting Jackson's concerned gaze over Lily's head. "Not severe enough for hospitalization, but she needs antibiotics and close monitoring." While preparing the medication, Dr. Patel asked casual questions about Lily's medical history, questions that made Jackson pay close attention. "Any allergies to medications, Lily?" The little girl looked at Mia, who answered for her. "No allergies." "Any asthma or chronic conditions?" "No," Mia said. "She's usually healthy." "What about your parents? Any family history of respiratory problems?" A heavy silence fell. Sophie stared at her shoes while Mia's face hardened. "Our mom died," Mia finally said. "Cancer, 2 months ago." Dr. Patel's expression remained professionally composed, but her eyes reflected genuine sympathy. "I'm very sorry to hear that. What type of cancer, if I may ask? Some conditions can run in families." "Lung cancer," Sophie supplied. "It was really advanced when they found it." Jackson felt a new wave of grief at this information. Rebecca had faced a terminal illness alone, raising 3 daughters while dying. Why hadn't she reached out to him? "And your father?" Dr. Patel asked gently. "Not in the picture," Mia replied with finality. Dr. Patel nodded, accepting this without further questions. "I'd like to take blood samples from all 3 of you, if that's okay, just to check for any underlying issues that might be affecting Lily's recovery." Mia looked suspicious. "Is that really necessary?" "It's standard procedure, Doctor," Patel assured her. "Simple blood work can tell us a lot about overall health." Jackson held his breath, knowing this might be his chance to confirm his suspicions without alarming the girls. After some hesitation, Mia nodded her consent. Dr. Patel efficiently collected blood samples from each girl, labeling the vials carefully. "Now, Lily needs rest, plenty of fluids, and these antibiotics," she instructed, handing Jackson a prescription bottle. "I'd like to run these blood samples to my lab. I can have results back within hours." As Dr. Patel packed up her equipment, her phone chimed with a notification. She checked it and frowned slightly. "Is everything okay?" Jackson asked. "Child Protective Services protocol," she explained quietly, while the girls were distracted by a tablet game Jackson had provided. "When I treat minors in unusual circumstances, I'm required to file a report. The system automatically notified Officer Chen." Jackson's stomach tightened. "Can you delay it?" "She's already on her way," Dr. Patel said apologetically. "Standard procedure when children are potentially homeless or without guardians." Before Jackson could respond, Sophie's voice caught his attention. "Your eyes are just like Mia's," she observed, looking up at Jackson curiously. "Same color exactly." Jackson met Mia's gaze across the room, indeed the same shade of green as his own, a detail he hadn't fully registered before. Not Rebecca's deeper emerald, but his own distinct jade color. "Sophie," Mia warned, but the middle sister continued excitedly. "And Mom kept all those letters in her special box, the ones for—" "Sophie," Mia cut her off sharply. "That's private." Jackson's pulse quickened. Letters? A special box? Before he could find a way to ask about this new revelation, Dr. Patel beckoned him to step into the hallway. "Jackson," she said quietly, "those girls have been through significant trauma. Whatever your connection to them, they need stability right now." "What makes you think I have a connection?" he asked carefully. Dr. Patel gave him a knowing look. "I've been your doctor for 15 years. I know when something is personal." She hesitated. "Also, the oldest girl does have your exact eye color. Quite distinctive." Before Jackson could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, they could see the outline of a woman in an official-looking coat. "That would be Officer Chen," Dr. Patel said apologetically. Jackson opened the door to a stern-faced woman in her late 30s, her CPS badge prominently displayed. "Mr. Reed, I'm Officer Chen from Child Protective Services. I understand you have 3 minor children on your premises without guardians present." From the living room doorway, Mia watched this exchange with rising panic. Jackson could see her already calculating escape routes, weighing whether to grab her sisters and run. "May I speak with you privately, Officer Chen?" Jackson requested, then turned to Dr. Patel. "Could you stay with the girls for a moment?" In his home office, with the door closed, Jackson made an impulsive decision that would alter the trajectory of all their lives. "Those children are not without a guardian," he stated firmly. "I have reason to believe I'm their biological father." Officer Chen's expression shifted from professional detachment to surprised interest. "Do you have documentation to support this claim?" "Not yet," Jackson admitted. "Their mother and I were together years ago. She left without telling me she was pregnant. I only discovered the possibility last night when I found a photograph among their belongings." "That's quite an accusation, Mr. Reed." "I'm requesting DNA testing immediately," Jackson continued. "Dr. Patel has already taken blood samples that can be used for this purpose. I'm asking for temporary custody pending those results." As Officer Chen considered this unexpected development, Jackson felt Dr. Patel's hand on his shoulder. He turned to find her holding a medical tablet, her expression stunned. "Jackson," she said quietly, "Lily's blood work just came back. She has your exact blood type, a B negative. It's extremely rare, less than 1% of the population." The statistical improbability hung in the air between them. This wasn't definitive proof, but it was another piece in a puzzle that was rapidly forming a clear picture. "I need to know for certain," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion. "These girls might be my daughters." Rain had replaced the snow by afternoon, drumming against the windows of Jackson's home as he sat cross-legged on the carpet of the guest bedroom. Across from him, the 3 sisters formed a semicircle, their postures revealing their distinct personalities. Mia straight-backed and vigilant, Sophie fidgeting with nervous energy, and Lily leaning slightly against Jackson's knee, the antibiotics already easing her fever. Between them sat a weathered wooden jewelry box, its lid decorated with hand-painted flowers. Rebecca's artistic style was unmistakable in the delicate brush strokes. "This was your mom's?" Jackson asked softly, careful to maintain the pretense that he was still learning about Rebecca. Mia nodded. "Her memory box. She made us promise to keep it safe." She fixed Jackson with a searching look. "You really think you might be our father?" The directness of the question, spoken in a child's voice but with an adult's gravity, momentarily stunned Jackson. After Officer Chen had left, agreeing to temporary custody pending DNA results, he'd gathered the courage to broach the subject with the girls. "The timing makes it possible," he answered honestly. "And there are similarities that suggest it might be true." He gestured toward the box. "Maybe there are answers in there." Mia's hands hovered protectively over the box, her internal struggle visible. Finally, with a deep breath, she lifted the lid. "Mom said someday we might need to find our father," she explained, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "She made sure we kept everything." The contents were few but precious: a stack of unsealed envelopes, a hospital bracelet, a man's wristwatch, ultrasound images, and several photographs. With trembling fingers, Jackson picked up the watch, a simple Timex he'd given Rebecca for her birthday during their second year together. She'd insisted on an inexpensive watch, saying she'd just ruin an expensive one with paint. "This was mine," he said quietly, turning it over to reveal his initials engraved on the back. "I gave it to your mother when we were in graduate school together." Sophie's eyes widened. "You really did know her?" Jackson nodded, unable to speak, as he picked up one of the photographs, Rebecca and himself outside their favorite coffee shop, arms around each other, smiling into the camera. They looked so young, so full of plans and promise. "You looked happy," Lily observed, her voice small. "We were," Jackson confirmed, the past tense painful to acknowledge. With tentative movements, Mia selected one of the envelopes and handed it to him. "She wrote these to our father but never sent them. This is the first one." The envelope, addressed simply to my daughter's father, contained a letter dated 12 years ago, just weeks after Rebecca had left him. Jackson unfolded it with unsteady hands, recognizing her flowing handwriting immediately. "I don't know how to write this letter. How do you tell someone their entire life is about to change when your own has already shattered? The doctor says I'm pregnant, with triplets. 3 little lives growing inside me while another is preparing to leave. The cancer diagnosis came the same week as the pregnancy test. Stage 4 lung cancer, non-smoker's type, aggressive, terminal. They give me 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. I couldn't burden you with this. You were just starting your company so full of dreams. A dying girlfriend and 3 babies would have ended everything for you. So I made the choice to disappear, to give you freedom while I fight this battle alone. Perhaps it was wrong. Perhaps it was selfish. But I couldn't bear to watch you give up everything to care for us, only to be left a widower with 3 infants. The doctors were wrong about one thing. I didn't die quickly. A new treatment gave me years instead of months. Years to raise our beautiful daughters, to see them grow. By then, you had become successful, your company thriving. Too much time had passed. What right did I have to reappear and disrupt the life you'd built?" Jackson looked up from the letter, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "She was trying to protect me," he whispered, the realization both healing and devastating. All these years, he'd believed she'd simply stopped loving him, when in reality she'd made an impossible choice from an impossible position. Mia handed him another envelope, this one dated just 3 months ago. This was the last one she wrote. This letter, written in a shakier hand, explained that the cancer had returned after years of remission, that Rebecca knew she was dying for real this time, that she had finally decided to find Jackson Reed, now CEO of Horizon Technologies, to ensure her daughters would be cared for. "I've told the girls we're going to find you. I've shown them your picture from the business magazine. We'll come to Seattle next month. I don't know if you'll forgive me. I don't know if you'll want 3 daughters you never knew existed, but they deserve the chance to know their father, and you deserve to know them. If you're reading this, it means I found the courage to send it after all these years of silence." But she hadn't sent it. She'd died before finding that final courage. We were trying to find you, Sophie explained, her voice small. After Mom died, we took buses as far as our money would last. We ended up at your building by accident. We didn't even know it was yours. The cosmic coincidence, or perhaps fate, of their seeking refuge in the very building owned by the father they were searching for, left Jackson speechless. Mia, who had maintained her composure throughout, finally allowed a single tear to fall. She wanted us to find you. That's why she made sure we kept everything, so you'd believe us when we found you. Jackson looked at the three faces before him, these extraordinary girls who had survived so much, his daughters. The proof was overwhelming, even without the DNA confirmation he knew would come. I believe you, he said simply, opening his arms in a tentative gesture. After a moment's hesitation, Lily was the first to move into his embrace, followed quickly by Sophie. Mia remained apart, watching with complex emotions playing across her young face. It's okay if you need time, Jackson told her gently. This is a lot to process for all of us. As rain continued to drum against the windows, Jackson held two of his daughters for the first time, while the third watched with cautious hope. The memory box sat open between them, its secrets finally revealed, bridging a 12-year gap between what had been lost and what might still be found. The Horizon Technologies boardroom sparkled with morning light, reflected off Seattle's rain-slicked skyscrapers. 12 executives in impeccable suits sat around the massive glass table, their attention fixed on the empty chair at its head. The wall of screens behind it displayed plummeting stock graphs and urgent messages from investors. Jackson Reed, for the first time in the company's history, was late to a critical board meeting. When he finally arrived, his appearance caused a ripple of shocked murmurs. His usual perfectly tailored suit had been replaced by dark jeans and a casual button-down. His hair was slightly disheveled, and most shocking of all, he looked happy. Sorry for the delay, he said, sliding into his chair without the usual authoritative presence. Family matter. Diane Mercer, the board chairwoman, peered at him over her designer glasses. At 52, she'd been with the company since the early days, her financial genius helping to steer Horizon through turbulent markets. Family matter? She repeated skeptically. Jackson, the Nakamura merger is falling apart. Our stock has dropped 15% since yesterday when you missed the investor's call. And you're talking about family? Victor Reynolds, Jackson's COO and oldest friend, intervened smoothly. I'm sure Jackson has a good explanation. Let's focus on the merger first. Jackson glanced gratefully at Victor, then noticed his sister Claire sitting quietly in the corner of the room. He hadn't invited her to this meeting. Claire, what are you doing here? His sister, a successful child psychologist whose practical empathy had always counterbalanced his intense focus on business, gave him a supportive smile. Victor called me, said you might need backup. Before Jackson could respond, his phone chimed with a text message. Reflexively, he checked it. A photo from Mrs. Henderson, showing Lily taking her medicine with a thumbs up. Something warm expanded in his chest. Jackson, Diane's sharp voice pulled him back. The Nakamura representatives are waiting for confirmation that you'll personally oversee the transition. Their CEO specifically requested your involvement for the next 3 months. Jackson set down his phone, suddenly aware of the collision course between his old life and new reality. 3 months of intensive international work would be impossible now. I need to make an announcement, he said, straightening in his chair. As of yesterday, I've assumed temporary custody of 3 children pending DNA confirmation that I am their biological father. The silence that followed was absolute. Board members exchanged glances, ranging from confused to concerned. Diane's expression hardened. Is this some kind of joke? She finally asked. Their mother and I were together years ago, Jackson explained, keeping his voice steady. She left without telling me she was pregnant. She died 2 months ago of cancer. Victor leaned forward, genuine concern on his face. So these are your daughters? How old? 10, 9, and 8, Jackson replied, unable to keep the pride from his voice despite the circumstances. This is precisely the kind of distraction I've been concerned about, Diane cut in sharply. Horizon is at a critical juncture with this merger. We can't afford leadership instability. I'm not abandoning the company, Jackson countered, but I am proposing a temporary restructuring. Victor can handle the day-to-day operations while I work remotely when possible. The boardroom erupted into overlapping voices, concerns about investor confidence, questions about timeline, demands for more information. Claire caught Jackson's eye across the room, giving him a subtle nod of approval. As Diane outlined the potential catastrophic impacts to the company's valuation, Jackson's phone rang. The screen showed Mrs. Henderson's name, and something in his gut tightened. "Excuse me," he said, rising without waiting for permission. "I need to take this." In the hallway, Mrs. Henderson's worried voice confirmed his instinct. "Mr. Reed, Lily's crying and asking for you. She had a nightmare about her mother. The other girls can't calm her down." Without hesitation, Jackson replied, "Tell her I'm on my way." When he returned to the boardroom, the arguments immediately ceased as all eyes turned to him. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "My youngest daughter needs me. She's sick and scared." "Jackson," Diane's voice held genuine disbelief. "We're in the middle of the most important merger in company history." Jackson looked around the table at the empire he'd built, the sleek technology, the market dominance, the wealth and power he'd accumulated. For the first time, it felt hollow compared to the need in a little girl's voice. "Victor can brief me later," he said, already moving toward the door. "Claire, would you mind coming with me?" As they left, he heard Diane's incredulous voice. Did he just walk out of a board meeting to comfort a child he met 2 days ago? In the elevator, Claire squeezed his arm. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." Jackson smiled, feeling strangely liberated despite the professional chaos he'd just unleashed. "They're my daughters, Claire. Everything else can wait." As the elevator descended, his phone chimed with urgent messages from investors and board members, but Jackson's mind was already at home with 3 little girls who needed him more than his company ever had. Sunday afternoon, sunlight streamed through the windows of Jackson's living room, illuminating the transformation that had taken place in just 1 week. Colorful throw pillows brightened the once sterile sofa. Children's books lay scattered on the coffee table alongside half-finished art projects. A hand-drawn family portrait, 3 small stick figures and 1 tall one, was proudly displayed on the refrigerator. The DNA results had arrived 3 days earlier, confirming what Jackson's heart already knew. The girls were officially his daughters. The sense of purpose this validation had given him felt strangely more significant than any business achievement. Jackson was helping Sophie build a Lego castle, while Mia read nearby and Lily napped, finally recovering from her pneumonia when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Claire called from the kitchen where she'd been preparing lunch. She had practically moved in this past week, her child psychology background proving invaluable as they all adjusted to their new reality. When Claire returned to the living room, her expression was tense. "Jackson, there are people here you need to meet." Behind her stood an elderly couple, both in their 70s. The woman's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse, while the man stood rigid, his jaw set in a way that immediately reminded Jackson of Mia when she was being stubborn. "Robert and Eleanor Winters," Claire introduced quietly, "Rebecca's parents." The silence that followed was broken only by Sophie's sharp intake of breath. "Grandma? Grandpa?" Eleanor's composure crumbled at Sophie's voice. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, tears filling her eyes as she looked between the 3 girls. "You look just like Rebecca did." Mia had risen to her feet, her posture defensive as she positioned herself slightly in front of Sophie. Jackson recognized the protective gesture. She was preparing to shield her sisters if necessary. "How did you find us?" Jackson asked, moving to stand beside Mia, his hand gently touching her shoulder in silent support. "The detective we hired," Robert answered stiffly, "after Rebecca's landlord told us she had died and the children had disappeared." His accusing tone made it clear who he blamed for this situation. "Perhaps we should all sit down," Claire suggested diplomatically, guiding Eleanor to the sofa. Lily had awakened from her nap and now peeked around the corner, uncertain about the newcomers. Eleanor spotted her immediately. "There's our little one," she said softly, opening her arms. To everyone's surprise, Lily approached cautiously. Your mommy's mommy? Eleanor nodded, tears streaming freely now. Yes, sweetheart. I'm so sorry we haven't met before. The interaction seemed to thaw something in the room. Sophie moved closer, her natural curiosity overcoming her hesitation. Only Mia remained vigilant, staying at Jackson's side. We brought some things, Robert said, his voice slightly less rigid as he watched his wife with the girls. He set down a photo album on the coffee table. Pictures of your mother when she was your age. The album became a bridge between strangers, connected by loss. Sophie and Lily crowded around Eleanor as she pointed out a young Rebecca on a swing set, at a piano recital, painting at an easel. Even Mia eventually edged closer to see, though she maintained her distance from the grandparents themselves. Jackson observed the Winters carefully. Beneath Robert's stiffness, he recognized a grief that mirrored his own, the loss of Rebecca and the years stolen from them. "Why didn't you ever visit Mom?" Mia finally asked, the question direct and unvarnished in the way only children can manage. Robert and Eleanor exchanged pained glances. "We had a disagreement," Eleanor said carefully. "Rebecca stopped speaking to us many years ago." "About me," Jackson concluded quietly, pieces falling into place. "That's why she never contacted you after she left Seattle." Robert's expression hardened again. "She was throwing away her future for a penniless dreamer with a computer scheme," he said bluntly. "We gave her a choice. Come home and get her life back on track, or stay with you and lose our support." "So, she chose neither," Jackson realized aloud. The revelation was another piece of Rebecca's complicated puzzle. Her parents' ultimatum had contributed to her decision to face her illness alone. "And then she got sick," Eleanor added, her voice breaking. "All those years wasted on pride, and now she's gone." Sophie, with her unerring ability to cut through tension, picked up a framed photo of Rebecca that Jackson had placed on the bookshelf. "Mom kept your pictures too," she told the Winters. "She said you loved her, even when you were angry." Eleanor dissolved into fresh tears, while Robert turned away, his shoulders rigid with suppressed emotion. Claire appeared with coffee and juice, creating a momentary distraction. As she helped distribute the drinks, she whispered to Jackson, "They're filing for custody." "That's why they're really here." The warning sent a cold wave through Jackson. He glanced at the girls, Lily showing Eleanor her favorite stuffed animal, Sophie flipping through the photo album, Mia watching everything with those observant eyes. "Mr. Reed," Robert said formally, confirming Claire's warning. "We appreciate you taking the girls in temporarily, but they belong with family who actually knew Rebecca, who share her values, and can tell them about their mother." "They are with family," Jackson replied evenly, keeping his voice low to avoid alarming the girls. "I'm their father." "A father who didn't exist in their lives until a week ago," Robert countered. "Through no choice of my own," Jackson reminded him, feeling his temper rise. Sensing the tension, Mia moved closer to Jackson, her small hand slipping into his in a gesture that spoke volumes. The simple action, this girl who had been so slow to trust now standing firmly by his side, steadied him. Claire intervened smoothly. "This is a lot for everyone to process. What matters most is what's best for the girls." As if on cue, all three sisters gravitated toward Jackson, forming a protective unit that clearly surprised the Winters. "We've just found our dad," Mia stated with unexpected clarity. "We're not leaving him." Eleanor's expression softened as she observed the girls' clear attachment. "Perhaps we could discuss arrangements, regular visits, Sunday dinners." Jackson recognized the olive branch for what it was. "I think that's a conversation worth having," he agreed, meeting Robert's gaze directly. "The girls deserve to know all their family." As the Winters prepared to leave, promising to return the following Sunday, Eleanor hugged each girl while Robert stood awkwardly by. At the door, Eleanor paused, looking back at Jackson with the same green eyes that Rebecca had passed to Mia. "She kept those letters for a reason," she said quietly. "Whatever happened between you two, Rebecca wanted them to find you in the end." After they departed, Mia approached Jackson with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Are they going to take us away from you?" Jackson knelt to meet her at eye level. "No one is taking you anywhere you don't want to go. We're a family now." For the first time, Mia initiated a hug, her thin arms wrapping tightly around his neck. "Mom kept those letters for a reason," she echoed Eleanor's words. "She wanted us to find you." The family courtroom's wood-paneled walls seemed to absorb sound, creating a hushed atmosphere that amplified every cough, every shuffled paper. Jackson sat at one table with his attorney, while the Winters occupied the opposite side with their legal team. The formal setting felt worlds away from the home environment Jackson had carefully created over the past 3 weeks. Judge Harriet Coleman, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with a reputation for child-centered decisions, surveyed the room over reading glasses. The girls waited in a separate chamber with Miss Franklin, their court-appointed advocate. "This is an unusual case," Judge Coleman began, her voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. "We have biological grandparents seeking custody of their deceased daughter's children against the biological father who only recently discovered their existence." Jackson's attorney presented their case first: the DNA confirmation, the home environment Jackson had established, the girls' improving emotional stability, and most importantly, their expressed wishes to stay with their father. The Winters attorney countered with arguments about established family connections, shared grief over Rebecca, and concerns about Jackson's demanding career. "Mr. Reed has no experience as a parent," he emphasized, "and his professional commitments make him unavailable for consistent care." As if summoned by this criticism, Victor appeared at the back of the courtroom, slipping in quietly to sit behind Jackson in a show of support. Jackson felt a surge of gratitude. Despite the chaos his absence had created at Horizon, his oldest friend was here when it mattered most. "Your Honor," the Winters attorney continued, "Mr. Reed is CEO of a major corporation currently undergoing a significant merger. How can he possibly provide the attention these traumatized children require?" Jackson had anticipated this argument. When his attorney nodded, he rose to address the court directly. "Your Honor, 3 weeks ago, my life changed forever when I discovered I had 3 daughters. Since then, I've restructured my entire company to accommodate my new role as their father. I've delegated daily operations to my COO. I've converted my home office into a proper bedroom. I've learned to cook meals that aren't microwaved and to braid hair that doesn't stay braided." A ripple of gentle laughter broke the tension. Even Judge Coleman's lips twitched. "I've also learned," Jackson continued more solemnly, "that I was robbed of 10 years with my children because of miscommunication and pride on all sides. I can't get those years back, but I refuse to lose another day." He turned slightly to face the Winters. "I don't want to keep the girls from their grandparents. They deserve to know their mother through the people who raised her. But they've already lost one parent. Please don't ask them to lose another." Robert Winters remained stoic, but Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. After hearing character witnesses, reviewing Ms. Franklin's evaluation, and reading reports from Claire about the girl's psychological adjustment, Judge Coleman made an unexpected decision. "I'd like to speak with the children myself," she announced, privately. When the girls entered the courtroom 10 minutes later, they moved as a unit, Mia in the lead, followed by Sophie, with Lily holding tightly to her sister's hand. They looked small and vulnerable against the imposing backdrop of legal proceedings. Judge Coleman spoke kindly but directly. "Girls, there are people here who love you very much and want what's best for you. I need to hear from you. Where do you want to live?" A heavy silence followed. Jackson held his breath, knowing he couldn't influence their decision, but hoping desperately they would choose him. After a moment, Lily stepped forward, her voice small but clear in the hushed courtroom. "We want to stay with our dad, but see Grandma and Grandpa lots. Mom would like that." The simple wisdom of her answer, finding the middle path that honored all connections, seemed to touch everyone present. Even Robert's rigid posture softened slightly. Judge Coleman nodded thoughtfully. "I believe that's exactly what your mother would want," she agreed, then turned to the adults. "My ruling is as follows. Primary custody to Mr. Reed with generous visitation rights for the grandparents, including weekly Sunday dinners and shared holidays." As they exited the courtroom, Eleanor approached Jackson hesitantly. "She would be happy with this," she said quietly. "Rebecca always did believe in second chances." That evening, Jackson helped the girls create a memory corner in their bedroom, arranging Rebecca's photographs alongside mementos from the memory box. As he tucked them in, Mia caught his hand. Dad, she said, using the word for the first time. Thank you for finding us. Jackson's heart swelled with an emotion too powerful for words. They had found each other, and somehow, in this unexpected family forged from loss, they were all being saved. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Rebecca Winters Foundation's newly opened headquarters. The space, bright, welcoming, and filled with children's artwork, looked nothing like the corporate offices Jackson had once prioritized above all else. 1 year had passed since a snowstorm had brought 3 little girls into his life and forever changed its trajectory. Now, Jackson stood before a gathered crowd, his daughters beside him in matching dresses, as photographers captured the ribbon-cutting ceremony. When my daughters found me a year ago, Jackson began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, they taught me that family transcends distance, time, and even death. Rebecca, their mother, made difficult choices from an impossible position. Today, we honor her memory by helping others facing similar circumstances. The Foundation's mission was elegantly simple: to assist terminally ill single parents in creating transition plans for their children. Already, 20 families had received support, from legal assistance to memory recording projects to financial planning. Jackson looked different now, his hair slightly longer, his clothing more relaxed, his smile easier. The corporate titan had given way to something more human, more connected. Claire, now the Foundation's co-director, stood nearby with the Winters, who had become regular fixtures in their lives. Sunday dinners had extended to weekend visits, joint vacations, and genuine warmth as old grievances gave way to shared purpose. I'd like to invite a special guest to speak, Jackson continued, beckoning Victor forward. The man who kept Horizon Technologies running while I learned how to be a father. Victor clasped his friend's shoulder before addressing the crowd. I'm pleased to announce that Horizon's Educational Technology Division will be partnering with the Foundation to provide digital resources for children navigating family transitions. The merger succeeded beyond expectations, proving that companies can thrive while their leaders prioritize family. The girls joined Jackson on stage, each placing a rose beside a large portrait of Rebecca. Mia, growing tall and confident at 11, spoke with remarkable poise about memories of her mother. Sophie, her artistic talents flourishing, had designed the Foundation's logo. Lily, fully recovered and thriving in 3rd grade, sang a short song that left few dry eyes in the audience. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and toured the facilities, Jackson slipped away to the balcony. From his pocket, he withdrew Rebecca's final unsent letter, words he had read countless times over the past year. The anger and grief that had initially accompanied its discovery had mellowed into something like acceptance. "Dad," Lily's voice called from inside. "Come see." Grandpa's showing embarrassing pictures of Mom as a teenager. Jackson smiled, tucking the letter away. Inside, Robert was indeed displaying photos of a teenage Rebecca with braces and unfortunate 90s fashion choices, to the girls' delighted giggles. Eleanor was collecting email addresses for the Foundation's newsletter, while Claire showed a new client family around the facilities. The scene before him, this blend of past and present, of grief transformed into purpose, filled Jackson with profound gratitude. A year ago, he had been wealthy beyond measure, but impoverished in all the ways that mattered. Now, watching his daughters laugh with their grandparents, he understood what true wealth meant. "Rebecca," he whispered to the open sky, "they're amazing. Thank you for finding a way to bring them to me." As if in answer, Sophie called out, "Dad, come play the game with us. We need you." Without hesitation, Jackson Reed, tech mogul, grieving almost lover and devoted father, hurried to join his family, the broken pieces of his heart finally healed into something stronger than before. Stories like Jackson's remind us that family comes in many forms, and sometimes our greatest heartbreaks lead to our greatest blessings. What unexpected turn changed your life for the better? Share in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe for more videos that will warm your soul every week.